Let's talk about the lessons from and myths about Tuesday night. Donald Trump's victory was certainly unexpected. I wouldn't call it impressive, given whom he was facing. But that doesn't mean future Republican election victories are assured. Now, that's all writes or begins Ben Shapiro at nationalreview.com yesterday. And that would always be the case. But what Trump's victory does is preclude any future Republican victories. I would go so far as to argue virtually guarantees that dismal outcome. Remember, Julian Castro, 2020. Just bear that in mind. Now, in the wake of Donald Trump's stunning victory over Hillary Clinton, again, Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton because he was facing Hillary Clinton, just like Hillary Clinton beating Donald Trump would have been because she was facing Donald Trump. They were each other's only opponent that they could defeat. So, I mean, I know to the low information voter and to the world, anybody who wasn't paying attention, it probably comes across as stunning, yeah. But it really isn't once you become fully educated about the subject. But in the wake of Donald Trump's victory over Hillary Clinton in one of the greatest political upsets of all time, or at least it appeared to be, everyone is rushing to uncover the lessons of the election. They're going to get it all wrong, especially Trump supporters. Was Donald Trump a unique candidate? Did he uncover a vast... yeah, he was a unique candidate. He was the textbook con man who recognized the golden opportunity. So yeah, he was a unique candidate. Did he uncover a vast movement? No, he uncovered a shrinking one. And he was greatly blessed with the only opponent that he could defeat. Has he crafted a new coalition of voters capable of forming a durable majority in future elections? No, he has not. The justifiable excitement that surrounds victory often leads to over-enthusiastic projections from sparse data points. That's obviously the tendency after a result nobody sees coming. The euphoria of victory, overconfidence, hubris. But it would be a mistake, and we all fall victim to it, so I'm not polishing my halo here, just understand. I've done the same thing too. But it would be a mistake to draw too broadly from a unique election result. Some lessons can be learned, some false lessons should be avoided. Of course, what Trumplicans will do is the opposite of that. First, the real lessons. Election spending means a lot less when free media coverage is wall to wall. Donald Trump was heavily outspent in the battleground states. In Florida, Hillary destroyed him on the airwaves, but he won the state anyway. A squeaker. The overbroad lesson here would be simple. You never have to spend money on ads. That's what you hear from Trumplicans. Oh, you broke all the rules. Throw out the rules. You don't need infrastructure. You don't campaign infrastructure. You don't need a ground game. You don't need ads. You don't need anything. Well, okay, but what you did have was something that you're not going to get with any other candidate. Like all fascist dictators, Donald Trump is unique, and the means of his success cannot be replicated, you see. I mean, after all, Trump spent practically nothing on TV advertisements during the primaries, but squashed the lead spender, Jeb Bush. And yet that would ignore the advantages of Trump's name recognition and massive media dominance. Mitt Romney didn't spend early enough on ads in 2012, and it hurt him. Trump was never hurt by staying off the air because Trump already had name recognition. Republicans running for president should worry about getting their names out there before the primaries if they want to avoid blowing out their bank accounts on ads most voters will speed through with TiVo. But the thing is, there won't be Republicans running for president until 2024, challenging President Julian Castro. Here's another one, another legit lesson. The media can destroy candidates, but they cannot help terrible candidates. The true story of this election cycle is not Donald Trump's supposed mythical mass movement. As of Wednesday afternoon, Donald Trump had won approximately 59.6 million popular votes. In 2012, Mitt Romney won 60.9 million popular votes. Barack Obama, though, won 65.9. In 2008, John McCain won 59.9 million popular votes. Obama won 69.5 million. Meaning Trump underperformed Romney and McCain, ladies and gentlemen, in a vastly expanded electorate. That is not the mark of a huge wave. Donald Trump didn't win this election. Hillary Clinton lost, as we're going to discuss on the next segment. Now, the media was able to achieve with Trump what they achieved with his two predecessors. They made him look unpalatable. But they were not able to achieve palatability for Hillary Clinton. I mean, the rule of thumb, the yardstick in this particular election is that whichever candidate, both of whom were hated and despised by the general electorate, whichever candidate was visible the last is the one who was going to lose. And James Comey, bringing up Emailgate again, saw to that. Up until the Friday, like 10 days before the election, Hillary Clinton was cruising to victory. And then Emailgate came up again, and she was put back in the public spotlight, and that was all it took. I mean, Hillary lost approximately 10 million votes from Barack Obama's 2008 election total. This election was clearly, because of Emailgate coming up again 10 days before the election, a referendum on Mrs. Clinton, and she failed. The media couldn't prop her up. Obama couldn't prop her up. Minorities didn't show up to vote for her. Nobody showed up for her. And so she lost. Consider the analogy of playing tennis with a hand grenade. Whichever contestant, whichever player has the hand grenade on his or her side of the net last is the one that's going to lose. And that's what happened. Here's another lesson. Non-college educated white voters are a voting bloc. White identity politics. The alt-right. For decades, Democrats have treated, and think of this as reactionary. If you want to put a label on Trumpism, a practical, descriptive label, try reactionary. Because that's what this election was. It was all about reaction. It was not about ideology. It was not about ideas. It was pure reactionary. For decades, Democrats have treated blacks, Hispanics, Asians, women, Jews, and nearly every other ethnic and sexual constituency as an independent voting bloc and targeting them individually. Republicans have heretofore ignored that sort of tribal campaigning, and with very good reason, because Republicans used to stand for conservative ideas that would bring people together of all walks of life. Race, color, creed, sex, religion, whatever. Trump was the first major Republican candidate to see non-college educated white voters as a distinct voting bloc worth pursuing. In other words, rather than closing the divisions that Barack Obama pounded into the American body politic, Trump exploited them and widened them and exacerbated them in order to cultivate his own identity politics movement. In other words, he took us in the wrong direction. He went further in the direction that Barack Obama had already been doing. In other words, this was a reactionary election. Trump campaigned on the basis of trade restrictions and on punishment for employers moving out of Rust Belt ideas, neither of which are conservative ideas, but rather white identity politics reactions, while fighting back against the left's anti-white, anti-Christian agenda. Well, not the anti-Christian agenda, but the anti-white agenda. Remember, Trump transgenderized the bathrooms in Trump Tower last spring. So he's not fighting back against any anti-Christian agenda. But against the left's anti-white agenda, yeah. But that's a reaction. That's not a principled response. And the result? Non-college educated white voters went for Trump by a whopping 72% to 23% margin, according to CBS News' exit polls. By contrast, Mrs. Clinton won the Hispanic vote 65% to 29%. In other words, Trump won non-college educated voters, or non-college educated whites, by a larger margin than Mrs. Clinton won Hispanics. That's amazing, but it's also a testament to the alienation of non-college whites from the Democrat politicians who have patronized them for decades, calling them bitter clingers and deplorables. Now, and understand as well that white people, white voters, if you want to consider white people to be a voting bloc, that voting bloc is shrinking. Shrinking. Minorities are growing. Us, white people, as a voting bloc, it's shrinking, getting smaller. So this constitutes getting a larger and larger percentage of a smaller and smaller constituency. The future is conservatism, if you want to win. Bringing more and more people into an idea, an ideology, a philosophy. That's what Ronald Reagan did back in the 80s. Cultivating an idea that can unify people, not driving the divisions even deeper, and just rather than fighting the very idea of tribalism, Trumpers have embraced it. But in so doing, they have won a battle, but they've doomed themselves to lose the war, because sooner or later, white people are not going to be enough. You're going to need Hispanics. You're going to need blacks. You're going to need everybody. If you play the identity politics game, that's guaranteed to lose. In the not even long run, and just in the moderately distant future. The near future, even. Conservatism can win in the long haul, not Trumpism. Trumpism is a one-off. Yeah, you won this election, Trumpers. You did. No question about it. But you did it not because of Trump, not because Trump won, but because Hillary lost. And the Democrats, I used to say, and I'm amazed that they did it this time, I used to say the Democrats are never going to nominate a white, well, I said white male candidate ever again, but it applied to Mrs. Clinton too. But they're never going to nominate a non-minority candidate ever again. Because look what they did with Barack Obama. Why would they go back to nominating white people again? I guess the thinking was, well, you nominate a woman, first woman president. Blah, blah, blah. Well, that might have worked if they nominated Elizabeth Warren, for example, which I was absolutely convinced that they would. And then, wow, they really nominated Hillary? Really? Didn't they learn anything from 2008? Yeah, well, no, I guess they didn't. And now they've paid the price. And I guarantee you that lesson, the Democrats are going to learn that lesson, because guess what? La Clinton Nostra, as I'm going to discuss in a subsequent video, La Clinton Nostra is dead. This was it. This was their last stand. And they lost. The Clintons are done. And the Democrat Party is now full-bore Bernie Sanders, Marxist-Leninist, communist. There's no longer any lingering New Democrat holdover from the 90s. It's over. And I guarantee you, the Democrats are never going to nominate a white candidate ever again, especially not in 2020. My former friend Douglas V. Gibbs used to talk about how, he used to talk. When I was saying, well, it's going to be Elizabeth Warren, it just has to be. It's a no-brainer, right? She's got the ear and enthusiastic support of the Democrat Party's Marxist-Leninist base. They're enthusiastic about her, and she's a woman, so the first woman president. She could make the vagina argument work. But Gibbs would talk about, no, it's going to be Julian Castro. And of course, I thought that it would. I figured the 2016 Democrat ticket was going to be Elizabeth Warren and Julian Castro. Because then, Elizabeth Warren, she's not much younger than Hillary is. So she would serve a term, and then Julian Castro would take the baton in 2020 and go well into the future. Well, that's still going to happen. Because look, in fact, you Trumplicans have made that easier. Because here's a newsflash for you. Yeah, Trump's the president-elect. He's going to be the president. No, that's reality. But in 2020, there's no question who Julian Castro's opponent in 2020 is going to be now. And is Donald Trump not the perfect foil for Julian Castro? I think he is. So you Trumpers, what you have done is, again, you have won a battle but lost the war. As a receptacle for conservatism, the Republican Party is, the 2016 was the last stand for that. The Republican Party is no longer the party of conservatism. It's the party of reaction. And you're going to see it. You're going to see it as unfold over the next 4 years, or 4 or maybe fewer. Does anybody doubt that Trump's impeachment by a restored Democrat Congress in 2019 is a very real possibility? I don't know whether they'll succeed or not, but they'll try. But yeah, you've the Republican Party as a conservative entity. The last stand for that was 2016. That's it. That's gone. The Republican Party is no longer the party of conservatism. It's the party of reaction, and reaction's not enough. And in 2020, the next great brown hope will come along for the Democrats and Julian Castro, and he will annihilate Trump and annihilate the Republican Party along with him. And that'll be it. That'll be it. You'll be looking at the 2030s before the Republicans get competitive in national politics again, if they ever do. Much less if they ever rediscover conservatism. And that's kind of depressing to me because by that time, God, I'll be almost retirement age. You know, I mean, I never would have imagined back in 2007, say, that when I was in my mid-40s, that we were entering a time when conservatism would be in the wilderness for perhaps most of the rest of my life. But here we are. Now, let's go through the false lessons, the myths that people seem to be learning that they will need to unlearn, but they'll have an emotional investment in, and that should be put to bed immediately, but won't. Number one, polls don't matter. Pollsters are catching a lot of grief in this election cycle, and that's entirely appropriate given the fact that the polls were wrong about Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. That's where the election was won, folks. Everything else unfolded pretty much as expected. Those were the three big flips. Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, the Rust Belt. Hillary had solid leads in the poll averages in all of those states. But in the vast majority of states, the polls were correct, and nationally, they were correct as well. The polls made the mistake of underestimating Trump's support or overestimating Hillary's turnout. As Carl Bialik and Harry Enton put it at 538, state polls and forecasts based on them miss in the same direction. The more whites without college degrees were in a state, the more Trump outperformed his 538 polls-only adjusted polling average. Yes, that's an error. Yes, that's a problem. But the substitution of chicken entrails reading or Bill Mitchell-esque poll uncucking is not a solution. The solution is better polling, not distrusting all data, or at the very least, understanding the nature of probabilistic predictions rather than deeming a 51% chance of something happening a 100% chance of it happening. Here's another myth with this election. The white vote is enough. I touched upon it earlier. Donald Trump won on the back of non-college educated white voters and the absence of minority voters turning out for Mrs. Clinton. He specifically got high turnout in swing state rural areas where Mitt Romney underperformed, and that was enough to turn those states red thanks to Hillary's egregiously low voter turnout, minorities. But the white vote represented 72% of the vote in 2012 compared with just 70% this time. The percentage went down again. The black vote represented 12% this time, down from 13% in 2012 because blacks didn't turn out for Hillary the way they did for Obama. The Latino vote inched up to 11% of the electorate from 10% in 2012. Trump did better than Romney among Latinos. He lost them 65-29 compared to 71-27 for Romney. And blacks lost 88-8 compared with 93-7 for Romney. And young people lost 54-37 compared to 60-37 for Romney. But shift any of those numbers in the slightest, and Trump loses the election. He won in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, and by the skin of his orange teeth. In 2020, millennials will represent nearly 40% of eligible voters, and Latinos will represent 15% of the electorate. Blacks will likely remain steady thanks to Planned Parenthood, which will be fully funded by President Trump. To be competitive in the years to come, Republicans need to make inroads outside their white working class base. And what are you going to make those inroads with, Trumpers? Reaction? You shot your wad with that. This was a one-off. Based on how, the means by which Trump won this election. It's a one-off. He's never going to get that easy an opponent again. You can't do reaction when you're the incumbent. The other side will be reacting to you. You understand the difference? And I'll say it again, I guarantee you, the Democrats are never going to make the mistake of nominating a white candidate ever again. In other words, Donald Trump is already a lame duck, assuming he even makes it to the end of his term without getting impeached. Here's another myth. The ground game is in our hearts. Well, there's a appropriate one-word reaction to that.
Bullshit! 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 You're not telling the reason they're playing. Bullshit! Let's go bullshit!
The aforementioned Mitchell infamously tweeted that Trump supporters didn't need a ground game. The ground game was in our hearts. No, it wasn't. It was in the Republican National Committee's data banks, at least in large measure. The RNC's Sean Spicer said that the party's ground game was outstanding and Trump had no ground game whatsoever. Yes, enthusiasm for Trump was high, particularly in rural areas. But as previously pointed out, Trump's overall voting numbers did not outpace Romney's or McCain's from 2012 and 2008, respectively. The ground game did matter. All of this is important for 2020 and beyond. Republicans would be wise to consider the real lessons of 2016, to be prudent, to not get carried away with hubris, which is impossible for a personality cult not to do, before buying into myths about spontaneous mass movements, lasting demographic conditions, and the invalidity of data in the face of anecdotal evidence. But then, if Republicans, had any wisdom, they never would have nominated Donald Trump in the first place. Now, as to Hillary Clinton, you know why Democrats are claiming that she lost. Oh, it has nothing to do with her. No, it was sexism and racism and every other reason except the principal reason: Hillary Clinton. She lost because she's Hillary Clinton. I mean, sexism obviously exists, but to attribute herself's loss to it is absurd, as Heather William capably argues at nationalreview.com this morning. Well, that didn't take long. just hours after Hillary Clinton lost the presidency to Donald Trump, and hours after she left her disconsolate supporters at New York City's Javits Center, hightailing it to the confines of Manhattan's Peninsula Hotel to have a complete emotional meltdown from all reports, which is why she didn't concede until late Wednesday morning. Cries of sexism erupted across America's fruitless plain. On Twitter, under the top trending hashtag #NotMyPresident, many Americans bemoaned the misogyny that allegedly doomed Mrs. Clinton from the start. Trump didn't win because of Comey, MSNBC's Jonathan Alter wrote on election night. He won because he's a testosterone candidate and men weren't ready for a woman president. No, Jonathan. Hillary lost because of Comey. He was the proximate trigger. But what did he trigger? He triggered Emailgate, which put Hillary's face back in the limelight 10 days before the election. The real, as it turned out, October surprise. That's why, period, exclamation point, has... See, this is another thing. This is how the Republican Party has become like the Democrat Party. Now, neither party is willing to learn the true lessons from events. Trumplicans don't realize, aren't learning the lessons of why their candidate won. Democrats are not learning the lessons of why their candidate lost. Although ultimately they know what to do, and Republicans have no clue. Which is why 2020 is going to be a landslide defeat for the GOP. Now, introducing Mrs. Clinton before her Wednesday concession speech, Vice Presidential candidate Tim Kaine noted that Hillary had made history in a nation that is good at so many things, but has made it uniquely difficult for a woman to get elected. Elizabeth Warren wouldn't have had any trouble getting elected. I promise you that. It turns out the glass ceiling is reinforced with steel beams. Charlotte Alter wrote at Time magazine, arguing that Mrs. Clinton's loss may be as good a sign as any that we're not ready for glass breaking yet. Well, you get the right woman, and hell yeah, she can win. The stench of sexism, she added, engulfed Hillary Clinton's chaotic bid for the presidency, magnifying her flaws and minimizing her considerable strengths. No, Hillary Clinton only has flaws. She doesn't have any strengths. Here's a clue, Charlotte. She couldn't beat Donald bleeping Trump. That should have been impossible. Only Hillary Clinton managed to make that a reality. Well, something certainly smells about all this hullabaloo. In fact, the entire ramshackle 2016 election has been chock full of malodorous surprises. But when it comes to Mrs. Clinton's numerous flaws and resounding electoral failure, the culprit, sure as Shinola, isn't sexism. But Democrats would prefer we believe otherwise, because they can't handle the truth any more than Trumplicans can. In the closing weeks of the campaign, Barack Obama bemoaned the nation's latent misogyny. And just because Donald Trump is a misogynist doesn't mean that the country is misogynistic, which is also something that GOP is going to have to drag around like an anchor until they get dispatched by Julian Castro in 4 years. There's a reason we haven't had a woman president, he told an Ohio rally. Hillary Clinton is consistently treated differently than just about any other candidate I see out there. Or treated differently by whom? Americans didn't like her because she's Hillary Clinton, not because she has a vagina. And the left certainly didn't treat her differently. Oh, actually, you know what? In fact, that's true. The left did treat her differently because she was a woman. Just in the opposite direction. They nominated her when they should have known better. On November 4th, Bill Clinton chimed in, of course. I know there's a bunch of guys that are upset about having a woman president. They just don't want to fess up to it. Has nothing to do with that. Now, over the course of the campaign, Mrs. Clinton had played the vagina card to the hilt, to the cervix. Sometimes literally dispensing tongue-in-cheek woman cards to fans, friends, and supporters. If I'm playing the woman card, she regularly declared at campaign rallies, then deal me in. For election night, La Clintonostra even carefully chose the Javits Center, that unglamorous glass fortress on Manhattan's west side, as the New York Times called it, so that Hillary could declare victory under a literal glass ceiling. Well, I guess they had a good grasp of optics, if nothing else. As an aside, when you think about it, this is actually kind of weird. What on earth was the Clinton camp planning to do to that poor glass ceiling when they won it? That's a good point. Yell at it? Sit in a circle and try to levitate it like hippies used to do to the Pentagon? Give everyone in the audience hard hats, ladders, and hammers, hope for the best, and watch the resulting glass shard shower of terror? Oh, and incidentally, at press time, CNN reported that the actual Clinton plan involved using cannons filled with confetti designed to look like shattered glass. Jeez. I guess they misfired, didn't they? Ho-hum, like that would fool anyone. The ceiling would still be there! Yeah, maybe they didn't think through the optics that well after all. Well, luckily we never discovered the potentially sinister endgame of this half-baked political metaphor. The glass ceiling, quote-unquote, remains unbroken, at least when it comes to the American presidency. Women like Margaret Thatcher, who won the role of British Prime Minister almost 30 years ago, must be wearily rolling their eyes from up above. Hopefully, in the future, we will leave the presidential ceiling cracking to a far superior candidate. It's just that candidate won't be a Republican, I can tell you that much. Now, there are many reasons for Hillary Clinton's loss. The real reasons. Obvious corruption, lockstep leftism, disastrous healthcare prescriptions, abortion fanaticism, and basic incompetence are just a few. But her loss might best be summed up in a September 22nd video address she gave to the Laborers International Union of North America. After bashing right-to-work measures allowing freedom from unions, Mrs. Clinton stared at the camera, suddenly irate. Now, having said all this, she bellowed, head bobbing, appearing as though she wanted to throttle the entire world, and maybe a few stuffed animals too. Why aren't I 50 points ahead, you might ask? Which is very reminiscent of when Bob Dole lamented in the 1996 campaign. Why aren't I 10 points ahead? Where's the outrage? And, of course, Senator Dole had no idea what was coming. Oh, I mean, that a candidate who is confident doesn't say things like this. They don't go off message like this because this makes it sound like, oh, crap, I might lose. It's an admission of weakness. That was a chink in her iron, or her armor of iron discipline, you know? Oh, dear. Why indeed wasn't she 50 points ahead? Well, it was a question that answered itself. And a moment that, for obvious reasons, went viral. You recognized that It eerily resembled a famous scene, if you've seen the movie Office Space, where a terrified worker wildly shouts at downsizing consultants about how good he is with people. Now, sexism certainly exists, and Republicans have gotten elected an unquestioned sexist. But to attribute Mrs. Clinton's loss, a failed candidacy of an ossified political figure or fixture with enough toxic baggage to crush 17 glass ceilings, to sexism, is absurd. But on the Rorschach test of life, some people will always see sexism lurking around every corner, hysterically labeling each slight as a sign of eternal misogyny. It must be an exhausting way to live. Some would argue that it helped fuel the reactionary backlash that brought us the sexist misogynist Donald J. Trump.